you know that specific feeling. The one that lives in your chest the morning after something goes wrong. Not dramatic, not catastrophic, just the quiet, persistent awareness that you tried and it didn't work. Maybe it was a project you believed in. Maybe it was a conversation you'd rehearsed in your head 100 times that came out wrong. Maybe it was a version of yourself you were finally beginning to trust, and then something happened that made you wonder if you were right to trust it at all. The failure doesn't have to be enormous to be devastating. Sometimes the smallest ones carry the most weight. The email that didn't get a response, the idea shot down in a meeting, the moment you looked someone in the eye and realized they had decided something about you. And what lives on after isn't the event. It's the question the event leaves behind. The quiet, persistent 2 a.m. question. What does this mean about me? That question has been alive for as long as humans have been trying, and no one who ever lived sat with it more seriously, or, more honestly, than a man who had every reason to pretend it didn't exist. His name was Marcus Aurelius. He was the most powerful person on the planet, and he failed constantly. This is a kind of question that sits at the heart of what the Stoic path was built to explore, not failure as a concept, but failure as a feeling, and what a human being can do with it. Marcus was born in Rome in 121 AD into a family of privilege, but not imperial power. His father died when he was 3 years old. That's the first thing to hold, not an emperor's biography. A small boy who lost the person he was supposed to learn how to be a man from. His grandfather raised him, and from the earliest age, people noticed something about Marcus that was simultaneously a gift and a burden. He was serious. Genuinely, quietly, uncomfortably serious about understanding how to live correctly. At age 11, he decided to become a philosopher. Not read philosophy, become one. He slept on a hard board. He wore rough cloaks. He chose discomfort when comfort was freely available. This was not performance. There were no crowds watching. The habits he was building at 11 years old were habits he would still be practicing when he commanded 25 Roman legions at the edge of the empire's crumbling frontier. At 17, the Emperor Hadrian noticed him. This should have been the beginning of something triumphant. Instead, it was the beginning of a life Marcus never asked for. Hadrian arranged for Marcus to be adopted into the line of succession. Not because Marcus wanted power, but because Hadrian recognized in him the rarest thing, a person of genuine virtue who might be trusted with it. Marcus spent the next 23 years being prepared for an office he would accept out of duty, and never fully from desire. When he finally became emperor in 161 AD, Rome was, in some ways, already fracturing at the seams. Within the first year of his reign, 2 things happened that would define the next 19 years of his life. War arrived on the Eastern Front, and then the Antonine Plague appeared. A disease that would eventually kill 5 million people across the empire. His co-emperor, Lucius Verus, died of it. Entire Roman cities lost a third of their population. Marcus stood in the wreckage of a world he had just inherited and was immediately failing to protect. And here's what you need to understand about Marcus Aurelius, the thing that makes the Meditations one of the most important documents in human history. He didn't write the Meditations for us. He wrote them for himself. In the evenings, exhausted, often ill, in a military tent somewhere on the Danube frontier, he would sit down and essentially do what a man does when he is trying desperately not to fall apart. He interrogated himself. He corrected himself. He caught himself drifting toward bitterness or self-pity or the seductive numbness of power, and then, with enormous effort, he pulled himself back. The Meditations are a record of failure being processed in real time, not past failure, cleaned up and made instructive. Present failure. Active. Painful. And what emerged from that honest encounter is the teaching this video has been building toward. Marcus arrived at what the Stoics called the discipline of assent, and it sounds deceptively simple. It sounds like the kind of thing you could read on a poster and nod at and completely miss. But if you actually understand what Marcus was doing, what he was fighting against in himself every single night, it will change how you relate to every failure you will ever experience. Here is what it actually means. When something goes wrong, 2 things happen inside you almost simultaneously. The first is the event itself. The campaign fails. The relationship ends. The work is rejected. That event is real and cannot be changed. But the second thing, the thing that most people treat as equally real, equally inevitable, is the story the mind attaches to it. the interpretation, the meaning. And this, Marcus discovered, is not a fact. It is a choice. Not always a conscious choice, but a choice nonetheless. The Stoics had a word for that raw, uninterpreted moment just before the mind assigns meaning. They called it a fantasia, an impression, and Marcus trained himself, relentlessly, painfully, over years, to pause inside that moment, to see the impression before it became a verdict. He writes in the Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That sentence sounds like a bumper sticker. What it actually describes is an almost athletic practice of catching the mind in the act of creating suffering from raw material that does not require it. And this is where it gets genuinely surprising, because modern psychology independently discovered exactly the same thing 2,000 years later, with no knowledge of Marcus Aurelius. Aaron Beck, developing what would become cognitive behavioral therapy in the 1960s, identified what he called automatic thoughts, the rapid, often unconscious interpretations the mind applies to events, especially failures. Beck found that depression, anxiety, and chronic shame were almost always driven not by events themselves, but by the meaning the mind reflexively attached to them. The treatment, at its core, was exactly what Marcus was practicing in his tent on the Danube: interrupt the automatic interpretation. See the event without the verdict. If you found yourself pausing and thinking during this, that feeling is exactly why the Stoic path exists. And subscribing means this conversation continues for you every time a new video arrives. Now let's talk about your life, because this isn't abstract. You have experienced this, probably recently. Think about the last time you were passed over for something you deserved: a promotion, recognition, an opportunity given to someone who didn't work as hard as you. The event is real. It happened. But watch what the mind does immediately after. It doesn't just register the loss, it builds a case. It gathers evidence, it finds the pattern, and suddenly the promotion you didn't get becomes proof of something larger and darker, that your effort doesn't matter, that the system is rigged, that you were somehow less than you thought you were. None of that was in the event. All of it was added by the mind, and once that story is running, it colors everything. The meeting that afternoon, the drive home, the dinner conversation you can barely participate in because you're still inside the verdict. Marcus Aurelius sat in a version of this moment constantly. He commanded armies that lost battles. He made political decisions that led to consequences he couldn't have predicted. He watched people he trusted betray the principles he'd tried to establish. And he was, if the Meditations are honest, and they are almost painfully honest, someone who struggled enormously with self-judgment. He was hard on himself in the way that thoughtful, conscientious people tend to be hard on themselves, which is to say harder than the situation usually warranted. What the discipline of ascent gave him was not comfort. It wasn't a way to feel better about failure. It was a way to see failure clearly. And when you see it clearly, when you strip the event of the story the mind has attached to it, something remarkable becomes possible. You can actually respond to what happened instead of to what the mind has decided it means. Think about grief for a moment. Real grief, the kind that doesn't follow a schedule. Maybe you've lost something irreplaceable. A person, a version of your life you thought was guaranteed, a relationship that ended before you were ready. The raw event is devastating, and for a long time, it should be felt as devastating. Marcus doesn't ask you to bypass pain. He asks you to notice when the mind tips from grief into the story about grief. The version where the loss proves that love is foolish, or that you are somehow marked for loss, or that the future can no longer be trusted. That story is where the wound becomes a worldview, and a worldview is much harder to heal than a wound. Or think about something smaller, the moment in a meeting when your idea is dismissed. The seconds that follow. Notice how fast the mind moves from the event itself, which takes maybe 3 seconds, to the interpretation, which can run for days. He doesn't respect me. They never listen to people like me. I should stop trying. That rapid movement from event to meaning to identity is exactly what Marcus was training himself to see, not to deny, not to suppress, to see. Here is the practice. It's not complicated. Marcus describes something that translates in modern terms to roughly this. Tomorrow morning before the day begins, take 5 minutes and write down one thing you have been calling a failure. Not an enormous reckoning. Just one thing, recent or old, that still carries some weight. Then write two columns. On the left, write only what actually happened. The facts, stripped of interpretation, what occurred, what was said, what resulted. On the right, write what the mind decided it meant. Look at what's in the right column, not to dismiss it. Some of those interpretations will contain real information about patterns worth changing, real feedback worth hearing. But some of it, maybe most of it, will be the mind doing what it does automatically, which is to protect itself by building a story large enough to explain the pain. Neuroscience now tells us why this practice works. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for deliberate thought, judgment, perspective, goes partially offline when the threat response is activated. When you fail at something, the brain briefly treats it as a survival threat. Writing, naming, articulating, these activities re-engage the prefrontal cortex. They move the experience from the reactive system into the reflective system. What Marcus was doing with his quill in that tent was, neurologically, bringing himself back online. 5 minutes. A quill, or a page, or the Notes app on your phone. The tool doesn't matter. The practice does. What becomes possible when you actually understand this, not read it, not appreciate it intellectually, but practice it until it becomes a reflex, is something quieter and more lasting than success. It is the ability to remain continuous with yourself through failure, to not become a different, smaller person every time something doesn't work, to move through the experience without the experience redefining you. Marcus Aurelius ran the most powerful empire in the world for 19 years. He lost battles. He watched his plague response fail. He made decisions he would reconsider in the quiet of the evening and find wanting. His son Commodus would eventually become one of the worst emperors Rome ever produced. And Marcus, who understood virtue better than almost anyone who ever lived, couldn't prevent it. He lived with that. He kept writing. He kept showing up to the governance of an empire that was exhausting him. He kept, in the evenings, correcting himself without condemning himself. There is a line in the Meditations that is short enough to miss and important enough to carry. He writes, "Confine yourself to the present, not as an escape from the past, but as the only ground where genuine action is possible. Failure lives in the past. The story about failure lives in the present. But it doesn't have to." That's what Marcus found. That's what he practiced. That's what the discipline of ascent, at its most human, actually looks like. Not a stoic mask, not emotional suppression, not the pretense of indifference, just the practiced, daily, imperfect refusal to let the mind's verdict about the past become the floor of your present. So here is the question this video has been building toward, and it's one I'd genuinely like you to sit with. Not answer in 10 seconds, but actually consider. Is there a failure you are still carrying, something that happened months or years ago that you have not yet separated from the story your mind built around it? And what would become available to you? What version of yourself would become accessible if you could finally see the event for what it was and let the rest go? Leave what arises in the comments. Not because I need to know, but because writing it down is the first step of the practice. And Marcus Aurelius, of all people, understood the strange power of naming what you carry.